everybody, welcome back to our last set of notes on the systems unit. We're going to cover the circulatory system of our model organisms and humans. So to begin with, like always, we talk about circulatory system. What's the point? Well, if you look at our animation here, we basically have a heart, and the heart is going to push blood throughout the body through blood vessels, which is veins, arteries, capillaries. And basically, its whole job is to correlate with these other systems shown, the digestive system and the respiratory system. So what is it doing with the digestive system? All of these organs in the digestive system that are absorbing nutrients, like our intestines, are surrounded with capillaries, which are blood vessels that take the nutrients to the body and distribute them throughout the body through the circulatory system. The respiratory system is tied in with our alveoli. We talked about those being wrapped in capillaries to bring oxygen to the blood throughout the body, distributed by the circulatory system, as well as get rid of any waste products that are produced. So that's really the point of the circulatory system in any organism as its overall function. Now, circulatory systems are done and carried out quite differently. For example, we talk about our model organisms we've been looking at in comparison. So sponges, hydra, planaria, like how do they eat? Well, we talked about basically how do they eat? Well, the sponges were going to be our filter feeders, okay, if you remember that term. So filter feeders, and basically this is done where they kind of swoop food through the bottom and out the top, and the cells are able to grab onto it. So the term that we used for this was going to be intracellular, okay? And that's really what we kind of use as a general term to say, like, they don't have a digestive system that's complex. They take food inside them somehow, whether it's a gastrovascular cavity like these guys, right? Remember, the filter feeders don't have gastrovascular cavity, but these two do. And they just take the nutrients straight into their cells. How do they breathe? Okay, well, how do these guys breathe? We talked about how they breathe being in this process of direct diffusion, okay? And that's really what they're doing. So they don't have these complex lungs to push air throughout these things, so direct diffusion is occurring. And basically what we're doing is we're just able to, the cells, again, are just able to grab the oxygen they need and get rid of the carbon dioxide they don't need. And they're so small, they don't need these complex systems in order to do this. So based on this and this, do they need circulation? The answer is no, all right? Why don't they need circulation? Well, there are other systems take care of the jobs for them. They don't need complex hearts, arteries, blood vessels to move things throughout because they, quite honestly, are small and have low energy demands, which means they don't eat a lot of food. They don't need a lot of nutrients moved. They don't breathe a lot. They don't need a lot of oxygen moved. Therefore, their cells can just handle the job of circulation by itself. It doesn't really need any circulation at all. Bigger, larger, more mobile, energy-demanding organisms, even something as large as a grasshopper or crayfish being our kind of arthropod model here, they require circulation. Now, these organisms don't have anything super complex or crazy. Really, what they're doing is they're in this category of open circulation, which means they have exoskeletons on the outside, which means they don't have these complex structures on the inside. A lot of times these hearts, and we'll put quotes around hearts here, they're pumping organs, but they're not really complex hearts. They're just segments of their blood vessels that are able to squeeze and kind of just provide enough blood flow throughout the organism itself. But we'd call this an open circulatory system, okay? Now this whole idea is that blood moves through the vessels into open spaces around body cavities and organs, and they're able to get enough of the materials they need, whether it's, oxygen, nutrients, whatever. The body cavity containing these fluids is called the hemocoel, all right? So that's in this open cavity here. So if we're looking at this, we have our hearts right here, and you can see they can have numerous kind of pumping organs along the way, and then these blood vessels just kind of dump out into this open cavity around the critical organs that need something from the blood, and then it kind of circulates back up through blood vessels and pumped around again. So it provides some circulation, although kind of messy and not super efficient in terms of moving blood throughout the body. Moving up a level in complexity, looking at the circulatory system of an earthworm. So we look at our annelids, our roundworms. These guys have a closed circulatory system. That's what makes them a little different. So they have similar heart-like structures called aortic arches, which is down here. Basically, 5 of them in this earthworm are going to be pumping organs that push the blood around to the necessary places. Remember that earthworms had an intestinal tract that was a little more advanced than the other things we looked at. And they need something to push the nutrients from the digestive system around to the important parts of the body. It's closed because it stays within the circulatory system. So unlike our grasshopper or our crayfish, where they had this body space where the blood kind of seeped out and then got pumped back in, the blood stays within the blood vessels in a closed system. So you can kind of see how it's all self-contained. It's not just leaking out inside of the worm's body cavity. Materials such as nutrients and oxygen can reach tissues by diffusion across the cells, and that's something that we see a lot in these smaller organisms. Okay, so again, moving up in a little bit of complexity, we'll start talking about vertebrates. All right, so our vertebrates, how do they do circulation? Well, there are 2 strategies. There is the single loop circulation, which is really down here. Okay, single loop tends to be these organisms with gills. Essentially, it just looks like a loop. All right, so blood is in a closed system. These are both examples of closed circulatory systems. Organisms with gills, like a fish, is going to have a 2-chambered heart, and we'll get to that in a second. Blood is pumped to the gill to get rid of CO2 and take in oxygen. The oxygenated blood goes to the body. Once the body takes the oxygen and gets carbon dioxide in it, it goes back to the heart and is pumped to the lungs to do the gas exchange, then pumped to the body, then pumped to the lungs, pumped to the body. But it's all one single closed loop, and that's it. Okay. Double loop's a little more complicated. What a double loop circulatory system does in larger vertebrates, so mammals and birds, is it allows for lungs and respiration. Essentially, you need one side of the heart and then dedicated to receive deoxygenated blood here, and then it goes here, and then it goes up and to the lungs. All right, once it gets to the lungs, this is where our gas exchange occurs. Okay, and then the lungs pump it back into the heart. So here's your first loop back into the heart. So loop 1. All right, then once this oxygenated blood gets to the heart, it's going to go out to the body. So it's going to cover its delivering those, remember, the oxygen, the nutrients out to the body. So we go back into the heart, out to the body, and then back up into the heart. So that's the second loop there. So we'll get into that in a little more detail coming up. Vertebrate circulation, heart chambers, based on what the heart needs to be doing. There are different chambers involved in its structure. So essentially, looking at our heart, we have our fish. We just talked about 2-chambered heart. It just needs a pump to gills, then it flows back to the body, and then back into the heart. But it's all one single loop. And then we get circulatory systems of something like an amphibian. Okay, amphibian heart, so like a frog heart, is going to have 3 chambers. And basically what it does is, you can kind of see the mixing blood right here. Oxygenated and deoxygenated blood mix at the bottom of this heart in this ventricle. There are 2 atria that receive blood, and then they kind of dump into one pumping ventricle chamber, and it pumps out everywhere blood needs to go. So it'll pump to the lungs to do gas exchange. It will also pump back to the body. Not the best system, because you're not getting only oxygenated blood out to the body. You're getting some deoxygenated blood too. So there's mixing involved at this point here. Versus we can look at a mammalian 4-chambered heart. What we see is the blue deoxygenated blood comes into one side, and it goes only where it needs to go, to the lungs, right here, for gas exchange. So watch the blue to the lungs for gas exchange. Once the gas has been exchanged, CO2 is out, oxygen in, goes back to the body, or back to the heart, excuse me, and the heart pumps that back to the body, only oxygenated blood to the body. So it's this efficient system, again, with higher demands of energy, nutrients, everything that the larger mammal or bird would need. We're going to tie in plants real quick here. Circulation in plants can get a little complex, but we have two major structures we're going to focus on, which is xylem and phloem. They make up a large part of the transportation system in plants, which is really what circulation is. Xylem brings water and minerals up to the upper structures of the plants, and phloem brings nutrients through the plant tissues in kind of a two-way street in a phloem vessel, but that's what's responsible for bringing anything that the plant structures up top in the leaves are creating to bring back down to the rest of the plant. So that's our plant connection here, xylem and phloem. We'll get into the human circulatory system next.